Tom Herman out at Texas. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, discussing the game we all love each and every day with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. We would invite you to smash that like button and, of course, share these videos on social media. Subscribe here right at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We got Steve Helwick on the line. You can join him on SB Nation's Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty. Steve, a graduate of the University of Texas, has covered Texas football for the last 4 or 5 years. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
All right, big news coming out of Austin, something that we've discussed throughout the season in regards to the speculation about Texas and their evaluation of Tom Herman's performance that runs back to 2016. So 5 full seasons. 2017. So 4 full seasons there at Texas. And the decision made by athletic director Chris Del Conte. And then he got the support of the university president, board of regents, and so forth. So we're going to bring in some other contributors here. But before we do that, would love to get your take on Tom Herman's tenure at Texas and should he have been fired?
I do not think this is a performance-based firing. And you can look at the tweets of some of the past players in the program. And I think that there's more internal going on with how the players feel about him, and that this is not the results that we're seeing on Saturdays, which led to this firing. I mean, Chris Del Conte released a statement of confidence on Tom Herman on December 12th, said there's been a lot of speculation in the future of our football coach. And he said, I want to reiterate that Tom Herman is our coach, and he sees tremendous young men and promising talent in the program. And he said, Tom Herman's our coach going forward. And that was on December 12th. And then here we are 3 weeks later, and he's fired. And all that happened in between now and December 12th was Tom Herman went into the Alamo Bowl without 5 defensive starters, without 3 offensive linemen, only with 1 original team captain from the first game against UTEP. That was Sam Ellinger, who got hurt at halftime, basically played a game with a backup quarterback and just routed Colorado. This is not a performance-based firing, I don't think. And reading these players' tweets makes it sound like that there's something else, because Deshaun Elliott, a very prominent player for Texas recently, I think he was an All-American selection at safety, now plays for the Baltimore Ravens. He tweeted, and something that has since been deleted, finally can cheer my team on, win, lose, or draw, smiley face emoji. Former running back Chris Warren III, he was also a Charlie Strong recruit like Deshaun Elliott, has been very vocal on Twitter about this, tweeting, Texas, we're back, 2021 already better than 2020. And then he's had a lot of tweets promoting this firing. So when you're seeing how Texas's former players, especially Charlie Strong recruits, are taking it, it makes you sound like there's something more internal going on in the program rather than what you just see going out on the field. Because from a performance aspect, Tom Herman, 2 of his last 3 seasons, it looks like an upward trend. If you look at everything since 2010, 2018 and 2020 are the only seasons with winning 70% of games or more. So it looks like an upward trend performance-wise, but it looks like that there's something else going on right now within the program, treatment of players, et cetera, that I think that led to his firing.
We also have Andrew Miller on the line from Hook'em Headlines. Before we get to Andrew, I just want to follow up on the statement you just made, because you certainly substantiated a lot of those claims by looking over the social media communications out there. Had you had any thought process at all concerning there being disgruntled players or there being issues in the locker room or that type of attitude toward Tom Herman?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure that there's disgruntled players, probably every program, and that's the thing that's going on. But there's a good chunk of them, and a lot of them are some of premier players. I'm looking at some of the star players of the Charlie Strong, Tom Herman crossover type players, the ones recruited by Strong but played under Herman, like Charles Amenahu, Deshaun Elliott, and their tweet. they've been a little active on Twitter ever since the firing right now. So I know the players really love Charlie Strong. If you remember when Charlie Strong got fired, all the players just surrounded the press conference that day, and they all showed their support of him when there were rumors that he might get fired. And I think that might have been a tough transition for some of Strong's recruits, which made them have an inkling for a little more disdain for Herman from the start. So those players have been very vocal on Twitter, which just makes it sound like that there's been something else going on in the program
there's
we're seeing.
Yeah, definitely a lot of evidence there, but it would be an interesting and kind of strange move to make, considering that those players that were recruited and signed under Charlie Strong are obviously leaving the program, and we're going to soon have a all Tom Herman roster. We got Andrew Miller also on the line from Hook'em Headlines. Andrew, appreciate you stopping by to join us on the conversation. Tom Herman, of course, fired from one of the big football brands in the country. So we want to get your take on this as well, just in regards to whether you believe, based on performance, Tom Herman should have been fired.
I mean, a lot's happening really fast. So based on performance, I think it was easy to say earlier in the year that he should have been let go because of performance. But I just, of late, obviously he ended the season on a high note, I believe winning 5 of their last 6 games. They just absolutely dismantled Texas and Kansas State. And he had a lot of stuff working in his favor too, just in terms of the assistants that he hired. Chris Ash was looking really good down the stretch. Mike Yursich's offense was looking really good. And just in general, a lot of the young players that he had recruited and retained were, obviously standing out in the last few games. Bijan, Casey Thompson having as big of a game as he did. Performance-based, it's hard to say that. I think it just comes down to the inconsistencies both on the field and on the recruiting trail. I mean, it's hard to say that the Quinn Ewers flip from Texas to Ohio State wasn't the thing that really sealed the deal for Herman. That kind of dismantled any idea of the future of the Texas program, where it was headed. Even a lot of the 2022 and 2023 recruits that have given their reactions on social media, a lot of them haven't been all that bad. Some of them even seem positive in favor of the Sark hiring. So I think recruiting more so than anything was the problem for Herman and what led to his firing.
Talking the Texas firing of Tom Herman here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We would ask that you check out the videos and please subscribe here. We're here every day going live with the news of the day, and we've got some big breaking news, of course, with Tom Herman being ousted at Texas after 4 seasons, won 60% of his games at 32-18, did not win a Big 12 championship, got, of course, to the title game in 2018, won the Sugar Bowl. That was the high point, finishing at 10-4 and in the top 10, won all of his bowl games, but not against Oklahoma, 1-4 there. So, Steve, I guess we now go to, and Andrew brings up a good point in regards to usually that one step prior to the firing of the head coach or really evaluating his performance seriously is having him look at the coaching staff. And certainly Tom Herman did that prior to 2020 and bringing in new coordinators. And but 2020, a difficult season to evaluate. They only played 10 games. They went right down to the wire against Iowa State. Otherwise, they would have been playing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. So before we move on to any possible successors, and Steve Sarkisian's name is certainly out there, just your thoughts about the way this season went down and the standards of Texas. We've talked about this in the past, the standards of the typical Texas fan, how realistic those are versus what Tom Herman has accomplished.
I thought this season was a pretty good season for Texas. I know it could have been better when you're 3 plays away from an undefeated record, as I've said before. The Keontae Ingram fumble on the 1-yard line against TCU. Then you have it against Oklahoma, say they go for 2 in double overtime when they have a chance to win it. And then against Iowa State, there's a 4th and 1 deep in Iowa State territory where Texas runs its typical Sam Ehlinger QB power, but it doesn't get 1 yard, and it usually does. So you change those 3 plays, and Texas could be in a New Year's Six Bowl tonight instead of Iowa State there in the Fiesta versus Oregon. Or they could have even been undefeated with how good. I know you have the other side of it where they beat Texas Tech with some fortunate circumstances and West Virginia and a lot of those other close games. But Texas was a very good team this year, I thought, in the most part. And we saw the last two games. I know they were against Kansas State and Colorado, but Texas's offense really kicked it into a new gear those last two games, whether it was Sam Ehlinger or Casey Thompson back there. I thought Texas decided to go a little more vertical in the play calling, which was something they weren't doing for much of the year. More wide receiver screens we saw for most of the year, but they kind of start opening things up in the Iowa State game, vertical downfield, and I thought that helped their offense a lot late in the season. And we saw a lot of that in the Alamo Bowl. And another thing was the development of Bijan Robinson, who had some breakout games at the end of the year. He probably should have been the starting running back the whole season. Looks like Texas has serious talent in that 5-star recruit, and Robinson could be a star running back for this program for years to come. So I think that Texas was trending in the right direction at the end of the season. And I mean, you saw those tweets about that Texas was going to get a preseason top 10 ranking after that Alamo Bowl, and there was going to be Heisman hype and all of that. And just now that momentum from the Alamo Bowl just seems to stall next year, now that there has to be a whole transition, a coaching change, and now there's just more uncertainty, and next year might be a rebuilding year instead of a year where Texas really can capitalize on those close games that they had this year and maybe just turn them into more convincing wins.
Andrew, of course, that pie in the sky coaching hire for Texas fans and USC fans has always been Urban Meyer over the last few years. That's the first name off everybody's mind, and for good reason. We understand it. It's a top program, and he's the guy that wins national championships. Steve Sarkisian is the name that's being bandied about, most notably on social media. How legitimate do you think that is? Are there other candidates out there that you either believe should be candidates or you think are realistically candidates?
I believe there's a good amount of credibility to the Sark reports. Multiple sources are covering it. I mean, they talked about it on College Game Day this morning. I mean, there are other candidates out there. I've talked about that. I've talked about that in a pretty deep detail on my site already. I mean, obviously losing the Urban Meyer pursuit was not what Texas fans were looking for. There was no other home run candidate out there, but I do think that there were better candidates than Sark. You have to have someone in line if you want to replace Herman and you want to make news that's, this sudden. They said that they were going to wait. I think CDC said they were going to wait until after college football bowl season concluded to do this sort of thing. A few of the candidates that I really liked out there, I don't know if Texas fans really want to turn to the group of 5 ranks again, but Luke Fickell is a name that comes to mind. Really had a huge uptick in results on the recruiting trail and on the field for Cincinnati. Hugh Freeze is a name that was thrown around a little bit in some fan circle discussions, but that obviously has its own risks that come with it. And then I personally was a fan of the idea of the Joe Brady, if you really want to make a big splash hire, but that was just my personal take on the matter. So I know some people are going to agree with that, some aren't.
Steve, any thoughts concerning who could be the next head coach at the University of Texas?
I mean, it looked like Steve Sarkisian until David Pollock had his tweet come out that he said that he heard Sarkisian turned down the job. But some other Texas writers, it was Chip Brown who first reported the news, and then Jeff Ketchum of Orange Bloods said that he had multiple sources confirm, and it would be a serious left turn if someone other than Sarkisian had the job. Brian Davis, who I think knows the ins and outs of the program better than any other Texas reporter, said that he said that Del Conte wouldn't have fired Herman unless he already had a name lined up. So all signs point to Sark now, and just the David Pollock tweet is the only refuting evidence that we have at the moment. If you're asking which hire I personally would have gone, I did not think Sarkisian's tenure in Washington and USC, he had the off-the-field problems at USC with his tenure. And at Washington, the performance was barely above 500. I think it was 34-29 after 5 seasons there. Chris Peterson then took that program to a whole new level and was winning Pac-12 championships and competing for the college football playoff, had 3 straight New Year Six Bowls. So I didn't even think that Sarkisian had very successful tenures compared to Chris Peterson at Washington, and Clay Helton at USC, which were some of his successors at those schools. So I think it's not the hire I would expect. I know that he has resurrected some of his coaching career as a offensive coordinator at Alabama, and he won the Frank Broyles Award for best assistant coach in the country. But I feel like that there's a coaching hire out there that I don't know how he's gone unclaimed yet, and that's Gus Malzahn. I thought Gus Malzahn did a great job at Auburn. Bowl games aside, I mean, Gus Malzahn beat Alabama, 3 times, 2013, 17, and 19, which that's not easy to beat a Saban team 3 different times in the span of 7 seasons. So I thought Gus Malzahn did a pretty good job at Auburn. I cannot believe that he is unclaimed in the coaching carousel yet, because I thought he was a tremendous coach for what he did down there for since 2013.
These other top programs that have coaches on the hot seat, it seems as though Matt Campbell is the first name that comes to mind. I wonder why he's not being bandied about here. I would think Matt Campbell's a strong candidate, but I've not heard his name or seen his name on any of the social media. Yeah, Sark, maybe he's far removed from the issues that he had off the field. He wasn't highly successful on the field. It wasn't a situation where, like, Hugh Freeze had his demons and his issues, certainly, but he really produced at Ole Miss. Now, how well he produced at Ole Miss under the guidelines from the NCAA in a regulatory matter is another thought there, but he certainly produced on the field, and now is doing a bang-up job at Liberty. But you come with the baggage that you either have to evaluate, is that person removed themselves from their issues of the past, number one. Number two, even if they have, in reality, do you want that baggage and perception to hire and be a target of your program in regards to criticism and innuendos for at least a couple of years until they prove that they're a different and changed person? Very interesting. But like both of you, it just seems to have come down in a way that you would think that Del Conte has a name lined up and has a person lined up, and everything is somewhat structurally in order to become the next Texas head football coach, for him to let Tom Herman go in this manner. Interesting stuff. Anything else you guys think that's important regarding this situation? Steve?
Nothing's confirmed yet. I'm kind of waiting for an official confirmation with Steve Sarkisian, and I'm interested in the direction Texas goes with this and what the recruiting looks like. Part of me thinks that statement of confidence, which was kind of weird to release at the time, because that statement of confidence came right after news reported that Urban Meyer had turned down the job. And that statement of confidence was probably used for early signing day in December, is what I'm thinking. So now that early signing day is passed, how's that going to affect recruiting when a lot of players committed to play for Tom Herman and not necessarily the program, or ways like that? So Texas could be getting some guys in from Alabama that wanted to play under Sarkisian. They could be losing some guys that played for Tom Herman. So I think that we could see some very interesting transfer portal decisions coming up shortly with the Longhorns.
Andrew, anything else?
Yeah, I think the results on the recruiting trail are going to be one of the most important immediate impacts to the hire if Sarkisian is officially the guy. Texas has a pretty extraordinary lack of blue chip commits and signees on the offensive side of the ball in their 2021 class. That was, I think, at least for me, one of the bigger gripes with the job that Herman did. I like some of the hauls that they got, but maybe that's, immediate impact that's really positive for Texas. On the downside, yeah, it seems like depending on which assistants are let go, you might see some really, really big names enter the transfer portal. You kind of already have with like Jaquindon Jackson, Xavier Alford, Kenyatta Watson. So I think those are going to be the two things.
Yeah, it's kind of odd to evaluate his recruiting performance, because just looking at the class rankings and the stars next to the names, it's been a stellar recruiting job done by Tom Herman, but he's starting to lose those players in Texas, and that's obviously of concern. Interesting stuff. We appreciate it from Steve Helwick. You can join him on SB Nation's Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty. He keeps us updated on Texas football on a regular basis, graduated there. And also have Andrew Miller from Hook'em Headlines. So join him there, Hook'em Headlines on Fansided. Guys, we appreciate you stopping by and providing the insight.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, Tom Herman out at Texas. Many have predicted that. We obviously talk to you each and every day here, and many of you had said, Tom Herman's got to go. He has underachieved. It's been 4 seasons now. Just to review what he's done there at Texas, he came in following a very disappointing and run by Charlie Strong, who certainly didn't even win at the Tom Herman level. And Charlie Strong was there from 2014 and 15 and 16, had 3 years there at Texas. And after Mac Brown was highly successful with a national championship, 2 national championship game appearances, and basically a consistent run in the top 10 in the nation, Charlie Strong couldn't even get over 500 despite strong, pardon the pun, recruiting classes. Tom Herman takes over. They have a marginal season his first year in 2017 at 6-6, but to his credit, he was revamping the offense. He's an offensive guy, has an offensive background. They had Texas, the best defense that season in the Big 12, legitimately the best season in the Big 12 defensively, but lost a lot of close games, 6-6. Had an impressive performance in the Texas Bowl against Mizzou to finish 7-6. Then in 2018, that was the high water mark as they beat Oklahoma. They lost a series of close games, but were much improved. Competed with Oklahoma in the rematch at the Big 12 championship game, lost a close game in the final 4 or 5 minutes, and then had the monumental win against Georgia. Many thought it was a bit tainted based on opt-outs by the Georgia players and lack of incentive, but still beat a top 5 Georgia team in the Sugar Bowl to highlight a top 10 finish in 2018. They come into 2019 with high expectations and severely disappoint with a 7-5 season. They did just run over Utah, who came within a whisker of a college football playoff appearance in 2019. And they finish 8-5, pretty much the same season this year as they lost a lot of close games, beat Oklahoma State in overtime, lost to Oklahoma by a touchdown, lost some other games in conference to TCU in particular. They finish up at, 5-3, 6-3 in the regular season, and then another impressive bowl performance against an undermanned Colorado team as they just trucked Colorado. And I was highly impressed with the backup quarterback Thompson's effort against Colorado, and it possibly sets the stage for a quarterback competition if Sam Ehlinger and his bum shoulder decide to come back to Austin. And I thought Tom Herman, considering the pandemic issues and losing very, very close games this season in particular, but really over the course of his tenure. So on one hand, he's won bowl games, postseason games. He's played well as an underdog. Consistently, Texas has overachieved as an underdog. Not that they should be an underdog much. They're Texas, so they've probably been an underdog way too many times to Texas standards. But when they've been an underdog, they've typically pulled through. Unfortunately, they've lost more games under Tom Herman as a ranked team against unranked teams than anybody else in the country. 32-18 at Texas is not acceptable. It's understandable coming off the debacle that was Charlie Strong's tenure there, that it would take a couple of years to get going. So this, again, the 7-6 with a bowl win, the first year is acceptable. It's fine. It's a transition year. Then you have the breakthrough year, or what could have been a breakthrough year. It looked to be possibly in 2018, winning a Sugar Bowl, going to the Big 12 championship game, but now 2 seasons to follow that were disappointing and not being able to build upon that appearance in the Big 12 championship game and a Sugar Bowl win. Top 5 to 10 recruiting classes. So in regards to not doing a deep dive dissecting the recruiting classes, they seem to be the talent level that should compete for And if you rank it up against everybody in the Big 12, excluding Oklahoma, going to the Big 12 championship game. And that's been not developed and accomplished. It does seem rather odd, though, that they would bring in 2 new coordinators, completely revamp, for the most part, the coaching staff going into 2020, play a pandemic-ridden year that would almost be a write-off of, okay, you didn't blow us away to give us any confidence that you're the guy, but it wasn't a bad season. 7-3, you're going to finish in the top 20. You won a bowl game. Okay. I thought it set up for a 2021 hot seat year for Tom Herman, but that did not turn out to be the case. And Steve set us up with the reasons why that might have been so, that a lot of influential current players and former players were not in favor of Tom Herman. We had not really heard anything in particular concerning there being issues in the locker room or a cultural environment issue. We thought it was all lack of player development, taking top 5 to 10 recruiting classes and turning them into 7-5 football teams. That's not acceptable long term. But again, considering year 1's a transition, year 2, there was hope and optimism and progress, substantial progress. And then year 3, a step back, but year 4 is ridden by a pandemic that you could set up 2021 as being the year for Tom Herman. But Texas decided to pull the plug today. Appreciate everybody on the line. We got 254 on the line. For those of you who join some of these call-in shows and some of these live shows late, just keep in mind that you miss a lot of the conversation. So just join us after the video has posted, because we've got 27 minutes in the books and a lot of great analysis from Hook'em Headlines and SB Nation, Steve Helwick and Andrew Miller. Anything else in here that I need to see? Keep in mind that we'll be watching college football every day. Got my eye on Ole Miss and Indiana, and you can believe that anytime I jump on here and there's football on, I'm DVRing the football, so I don't miss anything. I've got my eye on Kentucky, NC State, and Ole Miss, Indiana. We'll provide some instant analysis on those games. I'll be back late tonight after the Orange Bowl to take your calls after the Orange Bowl, so that's going to be roughly midnight, 11:30 or midnight Eastern time, to talk college football and take all your questions. John, appreciate you reminding everyone to smash the like button. Thank you so much for that. It will be fascinating. Yes, it's just me, Tim, to see if Urban Meyer takes an NFL job in Jacksonville. If I were him, and he knows 1,000 times more about it than I do, I'm sure for him to take an NFL job, he's going to have to be proven that they are committed to winning and that he is going to have the resources and whatever level of power he wants to have in selecting personnel. As Bill Parcells once famously said, I just cook the meals. I don't buy the groceries. Some head coaches want that kind of power, but it's beyond them. It's beyond them to coach football and also evaluate personnel in the league and in the college ranks. It's a lot of personnel to evaluate and keep track of, and then also coach the players and do all the things involved with organizing a football team. A lot of coaches want that power. Very few can take it all on at the same time. JG is saying Texas is in a terrible pattern now, like Michigan, flailing around grabbing at any big coaching name they can grab. To a certain extent. Mac Brown left. He was done at the time. That was a situation in which it looked like that was probably going to be his last coaching stint. We have found out differently since. And he's been impressive in 2 years at North Carolina. They bring in Charlie Strong, and by the looks of everything, why not bring in Charlie Strong? If he could succeed at a place like Louisville and win a Sugar Bowl game at a place like Louisville, Why would he not succeed at Texas? And he recruited well there, but it was still a disaster. And Charlie Strong has shown not to be a capable head coach since then. They bring in Tom Herman. If you listen to Tom Herman talk, if you see the way he runs a news conference, if you see the way he has structured and developed players and developed an offensive scheme at other stops, Ohio State in particular, you would be fully confident that he would be the man for the job, but he's not pulled through. Joe Bo, Jordan Bowman, thank you so much for letting people know that they can join me on Patreon as well. It's 15 cents a day. Call it 16 or 17 cents a day if I do the math correctly. $5 a month. And thanks so much for providing the link there. You can either grab the link in the description section of any of the videos to join us on Patreon, or you can just go to Patreon and search Mark Rogers TV. So, Jordan, thank you so much for reminding everyone of that. We are looking for sponsors for our call-in shows, for our team-specific shows, Ohio State, Florida State, Miami, Nebraska. We are looking for sponsors. So if you have any contact with a sponsor, please contact me at markrogerstv@gmail.com. Mo Dean, I think it might be a little bit too late to cancel college football for this season. I think we pretty much played all the games except for, I understand there's maybe one more that needs to be played for sure. We got a couple more games tonight. I don't think those are going to get canceled unless we have some positive tests come back very quickly. Anything else? The payouts ridiculous. I saw 15 million, Navy Thomas. You're looking at 24 million. I thought it was like 15 million and maybe another 10 for the assistants on the coaching staff. Got Dominic here. Lewis, good to see you as well, my friend. Whoa, look at those numbers. Who reported those numbers? So Jimbo Fisher, Jim Harbaugh, and Nick Saban and Dabo are making the most money in college football right now. I don't think I've missed anyone. They're all in the $7 to $8 million range. Okay. Urban Meyer was offered $84 million for 7 years. If I'm doing the math correctly, that's $12 million per year. PJ Fleck. The thing you're getting with PJ Fleck is he's a tremendous coach and builder of environment and culture and a program and a structure. And look what he did at Western Michigan. Look what he's accomplishing at Minnesota. Yes, he's a very heavy personality. You're going to have to buy into the whole deal and just let him run with it and be okay with what some people call a shtick. Steve Sarkisian is a great offensive mind, great developer of personnel on the offensive side of the ball. What he did at USC and Washington outside of the off-the-field issues, just what he produced on the field doesn't seem to be anything special. He seems to be a run-of-the-mill football coach. I don't really see anything outstanding to date about Steve Sarkisian that Texas would be saying, you know, we got to get this Tom Herman out of here because Steve Sarkisian's out there. They either just ran into a situation where the groundswell from the players and the influential ex-players was just so great, as Steve talked about, that they got rid of Tom Herman. But just based on wins and losses, I would think, yes, Tom Herman's on the hot seat. He's not performing well and meeting the standards at Texas, but it hasn't been a debacle. 7-6, 10-4. 8-5, 7-3. Again, I thought 2021 was going to be the hot seat year. You need to be in the Big 12 championship game, basically. You need to be in the Big 12 championship game. You need to go 11-1, 10-2, and be in the conference championship game. That would have been roughly my standard. I wouldn't have said, be in the conference championship game or you're fired. He could have limped into the conference championship game at 8-4, gotten blown out of the conference championship game, and I'd still axe him. Or he could have went 10-2 and by some crazy tiebreakers not made it into the conference championship game and then won a big bowl game and gone 11-2, and I would have said, you know what, we'll keep you. But basically, I would have made that the standard. All right, everyone. It was great to have everybody on the line last night after the Ohio State-Clemson game. We had almost 900 people online at one time, and I think that video is over 13,000 views at this point. So thank you for calling in and for supporting. And again, smash the like button. We've got almost 300 on the line. We're going to be back later today. We're going to have a lot of analysis of these bowl games. We'll be on later tonight with our call-in show after the Orange Bowl. Anything else from you guys? Gus Malzahn. Yeah, Steve Helwick had mentioned Gus Malzahn being a good candidate or one that he would desire. I'm not a big fan of Gus Malzahn. He seems like a great guy. He seems very aloof and disconnected from afar. But in talking to some Auburn people recently, he was very connected to the players, apparently, and he was very well liked. I didn't understand that, didn't know that. But his performance at Auburn was not acceptable. He won about 55% of his games in conference. You cannot win at Auburn 55% of your games in the SEC and stick around. He basically made it through based on two things. That remarkable turnaround he had, which was probably his undoing, because that became a standard for him in going to the national championship game, the BCS title game, his first year, and coming within 7 seconds of a national championship. That, wow, this guy can do this. Coming off the most ridiculous turnaround in the history of college football, going 0-8 in the SEC in 2012 under Gene Chizik, and then Malzahn steps in, turns it around, wins the SEC, goes to the championship game. And then it's been 4 and 5 losses ever since. Now, we had that one magical month in 2017 where he beat number 1 Alabama, number 1 Georgia, got to the SEC title game, but the rematch was not close. They lose by 3 touchdowns. He loses to Central Florida, and nothing else. 4 and 5 losses every year. I would not be looking to hire Gus Malzahn unless I was a Group of 5 school or a lower end Power 5, like Illinois hiring Brett Bielema. Good hire for them. Yeah, that Justin Fields performance. My goodness, that was crazy. All right. Anything else from you guys? I appreciate everybody jumping online here once again. If you missed the majority of the video, just wait for it to post, and it'll take about 5 to 10 minutes for it to post, and you can grab all the information and the insight we had off the top on Tom Herman out at Texas. Steve Sarkisian appears to be the next head coach at the University of Texas. Why? I cannot support that hire. We shall see. He must have righted some things in his personal life and is learning from the best in Nick Saban. We shall see. But we'll be on top of it here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. See you tonight after the Orange Bowl, and we will have analysis of the bowl games that are being played right now.